Welcome! Today we are decoding the hidden language of our buildings, our cities, even our gardens. We're going to look at the world around us not just as a bunch of structures, but as a physical record of human thought itself.
So let's kick things off with a pretty radical idea. What if every single structure we build, from a simple hut to a soaring skyscraper, is actually a physical artifact of how we think? Not just a place to live, but a projection of our consciousness into the real world.
And this right here is the big idea for today, that architecture is basically a library of consciousness. It's a huge archive of ideas, beliefs, and ways of seeing the world, all encoded in stone and steel and space. And in this explainer, we're going to learn how to read it.
Okay, let's dive in. And to do that, we have to go way back to the very beginning. We're going to trace that first huge shift in human thinking and see how it got recorded in the very first things we built.
So at first, architecture was all about one thing: survival. A totally simple response to a physical need. You look at that hut on the left, its whole purpose is to draw a line. Inside is safe, outside is dangerous. That's it. The thinking is all about perception and protection. But then, something absolutely monumental happened. We went from the hut to the temple, a building made not just for shelter, but to define meaning. Suddenly, we're translating these huge abstract ideas, like gods, power, the cosmos, into physical form.
And what's so cool here is how this timeline shows this perfect parallel between our minds and our masonry. Just follow the line, right? Neolithic survival thinking leads straight to huts and caves. Then, as our minds evolve to symbolic, abstract thought in the Bronze Age, boom, we get temples and pyramids. Then comes the classical era's obsession with rational proportion, which gives us forums. Every leap in how we think, from symbolic to rational to analytical, is matched, step for step, by a leap in what we build. It's a physical snapshot of each new stage of consciousness.
So, you might be wondering, how did all these different cultures translate their unique worldviews into stone and space? How do they make their ideas solid? Well, the answer, in so many cases, comes down to geometry.
You see, each civilization developed its own cognitive geometry. Now, this isn't just about shapes you learned in math class. Think of it like a complete visual language, a blueprint of the mind that a culture uses to express its deepest beliefs about order, community, and how the universe works.
And this table just shows that incredible diversity in action. I mean, look at the Greek and Roman tradition. Their focus on logic created the perfectly proportioned columns of their forums. Now, contrast that with Islamic culture, where a focus on infinite unity led to those mind-bendingly intricate geometric tiles. Or Indian traditions, where recursive symbolism is literally built into the DNA of their temples. Each architectural signature is a direct printout of a unique way of thinking.
Let's take Islamic design for a second. What is so amazing is that this breathtaking complexity often starts with the simplest tools you can imagine, just a compass and a ruler. By dividing a circle and then extending those lines out into a grid, artisans could create these endlessly repeating patterns. It's a stunning visual metaphor for the theological idea of unity emerging from a single divine source.
The Greeks and Romans, though, they were using geometry to create a language of logic and order. They embedded mathematical principles, like the famous 3-4-5 Pythagorean triangle, directly into the proportions of their temples and public forums. The result? Spaces that just felt harmonious, balanced, and rational, a perfect reflection of their philosophical ideals.
And this just brilliantly shows a totally different approach. In many indigenous African settlements, the layout is based on fractal geometry. Now, fractal just means a pattern that repeats itself at different scales, like a tree where every little branch looks like a smaller version of the big trunk. So here, a central family compound is echoed by smaller, similar compounds built around it. The village literally grows like a fractal, with the architecture encoding the social structure, the idea of community itself, right into the physical plan.
Okay, so let's zoom out. We've been looking at individual buildings, but what happens when we scale up and see how entire cities become the external expression of a civilization's collective intelligence, its shared way of thinking?
At the city's scale, you can really see two fundamentally different minds at work. On one hand, you have the logic of the rational grid. A perfect example is a city like Teotihuacan in Mexico. Its layout is this massive top-down plan with a huge central axis lined up with the stars. This city is a statement. It's about control and a hierarchical view of the world. But on the other hand, you have a completely different logic. The logic of the intuitive network, like in this Medina. There's no grand grid here. Instead, you have narrow, shaded streets that twist and turn, creating a network that grew totally organically. Its mind is adaptive, it's sensory, and it's built around social connection and responding to the climate. Two cities, two entirely different ways of thinking made real. And that brings us right up to the modern era, and the one structure that, more than any other, really defines our contemporary consciousness: the skyscraper.
Now, we usually just assume it's a practical thing, right? A response to a lack of land in dense cities. But if architecture really is a cognitive archive, then the psychological reasons have to be way more powerful.
And here's the crucial point. Skyscrapers are really monuments to modern psychological drives. They physically embody our ambition, that desire to rise above. They satisfy this deep urge for mastery, giving us a God's eye view of our world, almost like a corporate data dashboard. They become these massive icons of our collective identity. And maybe most importantly, by stacking life into vertical layers, they actually rewire our brains, creating a vertical consciousness, a completely new mental map of how a city works.
So, what have we learned? How can we actually use this new lens to read the architecture that surrounds us every single day? We can bring it all together with one last big metaphor: the built world as the human brain itself. Think about it. Our first shelters, that's the limbic system, our primal core, all about survival. Those grand temples and palaces, that's the prefrontal cortex, handling executive reasoning and order. The cities that connect everything, that's the vast neural network. And the towers we build to look down on it all, well, that's metacognition, the mind's awareness of itself and its own aspirations.
Once you start to see it this way, the world around you is no longer just a collection of lifeless objects. Every street, every building, every public square becomes part of this living record of our collective cognitive journey. It's the story of humanity's mind, written in the language of form and space.
And all this leaves us with one final provocative question. Our consciousness isn't static, it's always evolving. So as our ways of thinking and connecting and dreaming continue to change, what kind of world will we imagine and build for ourselves next? What thought will we build?